It's December 20th, 2021. This is Roqe. When it comes to Persian music inside and outside of Iran, there's a great deal to celebrate. Legendary songs and melodies, brilliant artists, interesting cross-cultural innovators. But it's also no secret that the Iranian music business is fundamentally broken, from the effects of an Islamic revolution that banned music of almost all kinds, to a culture that sometimes devalues the status of arts itself as a career. Iranian music has been left dysfunctional and bereft of the international success and exposure that it would deserve. Today we begin a new series to ask why. The Plight of Persian Music, with our inaugural guest musician and producer Babak Khiavchi. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode 160 of Roqe. Nice to be talking to you. Hope you're keeping well. Wherever you're tuning in from around the world, hello to you from Toronto, Canada. Salam. Salam Dustan Aziz. Khosh Omadin. Durud ba shoma. Hello, Groovy Shaya.
Hi, Durud.
Hello, Durud. Hello, the fabulous Keon.
Hi, Jian.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
I would say you've got a fabulous tan, but you always seem to have a tan.
Do I?
Do you have more of a tan now?
I've changed races since you've seen me last time.
Okay.
I mean, is that too much?
I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. As long as you love all races.
I do, of course, yeah. But I changed 5 shades. So.
Keon is here. Shaya is here. We're still down a man. Sending love out to Captain Reza, who's still down with COVID, but improving, I'm told. I don't know if he's, hopefully he's doing all right. He says he's doing okay.
Yeah,
now.
He's not dying.
I leave 1 week and the whole ship starts to sink.
That's right.
Reza gets COVID.
We'll talk more about this later in the show. Your trip to Antigua, where you had an amazing time and got a tan, and Captain Reza being sick and almost dying at the same time. I hope you feel good about yourself, Keon.
I feel shameful.
Listen, we often talk about music on this show, and specifically Persian music, and specifically the Persian music industry and the dysfunction of it. And it makes sense that we talk about Persian music because it is one of those ties that binds all of us people of Iranian background. There's either through nostalgia or excitement about new artists. There's this. It's one of the few things, in fact, along with say Persian cuisine, that unites us in many ways. A Gugush song can bring us all together, for the most part. And so it's a very important part of our culture, and so it makes sense that that's something that we talk about in a program like this. And also, given who we are on the Roqe Team, I spent 10 years of my life touring as a professional musician. Shaya, you're a stellar musician. Members of our Roqe Team are musicians, yep. Savi, Roham, etc. So this is always something that we're interested in. So when it comes to Persian music, even when we are celebrating legendary artist or a brilliant Iranian song or a fabulous new discovery in the diaspora, there's always an asterisk. There's always a caveat. There's always a hint of sadness because of the state of things. And that is quite simply that the Persian music business and Persian musical artists continue to suffer the effects of a literal ban on Persian music when the Islamic Republic took hold after the 1979 revolution. The implications of this ban not only retarded the growth of what had become a burgeoning young industry in Iran, as we've discussed, but continues to have adverse effects on musicians and recording artists in the diaspora when it comes to anything from royalties to representation to innovation and to reaching a core audience of millions inside Iran that still cannot hear popular music on the radio, yes, right? Yeah. Cannot attend a hip-hop concert, cannot form a band with a female lead singer.
No.
I mean, it's for those outside of Iran, and those who, certainly the non-Iranians or those who grew up very westernized, these things that have become commonplace for the average Iranian, knowing that, you can't have a girl lead singer or something like that, are still shocking and are still deeply saddening.
Yeah.
But all of that is not an excuse alone for the way things have to be either. There are ways that Persian music remains dysfunctional beyond that oversized shadow of the revolution and censorship. Sometimes it's about the ingrained behavior on the part of Iranians and even Iranian artists that perpetuates a system that has, with very notable exceptions, of course, left Iranian music moribund, right?
Yes.
So we're starting a series called The Plight of Persian Music. And today is the first episode featuring, for our first part of it, I suppose, featuring a guy named Babak Khiavchi.
Yes.
Babak definitely knows his stuff. You know Babak.
Yeah. I'm very happy that we are going to start this series with Babak. He's amazing. For me, he's a definition of a good person who knows
a good person.
Good, yeah.
Wow, you're going to go that far.
Yes, yeah.
he's a good person.
Yeah, he's one of the most honest people that I've seen. In my life. He's amazing.
Well, he's also come at this from different angles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was in Iran and then he was in the diaspora. We're going to talk to him a few minutes from. He's in Seattle.
Yeah.
He's kind of he's a musician himself.
Yes, great
notably
guitarist.
so. I've got to ask him about playing that concert with Gugush. He's a producer, but he's been dealing with these issues for years. He tried to start an independent label, or he did start an independent label for a while.
Yes.
He's been writing about that stuff. He's been doing this Clubhouse series talking about Persian music and the history of it. He knows his stuff.
Yes, and as you said, he knows on stage, backstage, promoting side, everything. Yeah, publishing side, and
we want to continue this thing. Next week we're going to have a guy named Amir Bahari, who he's a genius in this area as well, and he's more recently been living in Iran, so he gives us that perspective inside. But today, Babak Khiavchi. And this isn't, when we talk about the revolution and the regime, it isn't just ancient history. There is, we're doing this episode this past week, I'm told, in the Majlis, in the Iranian parliament, there was a parliamentarian that got up and said, if you want to import music, play music, or wear sunglasses, leave the country.
Yes, we don't need music.
This is a true story.
Yeah.
What did he say? Do you know?
Yeah, something like, we don't need music in this country. If you want music, leave.
Imagine a 7-year-old kid hearing this and having to decide whether do I trust my government or am I going to be cynical for the rest of my life about it? It's what a mess.
Sunglasses?
Sunglasses. Somebody on the Roqe Team told me about this. I was like, what? Why can we not wear sunglasses? I thought, don't Akhunds wear sunglasses too? What if it's sunny?
I can't
why is sunglasses included? It's just Western or something?
It reminds me 100 years ago when the glasses, actually, they were kind of imported to Iran. Some Akhunds, actually, they banned wearing glasses? because they thought
they're brought from the West.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there was some element to this which was about not importing music and
the
things.
musical instrument, always they're considered as a luxury equipment. So because of that, it's very expensive in Iran, the music instrument. Yes, so. Yep.
All right. Well, there you go. That's enough fodder to legitimize to this incentive for this series we're starting. Hey, we are coming to you on rookmedia.com. It is there that you can link to all of our platforms. We're on our ongoing mission to build a new audio-visual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, and CastBox. If you like to see some visuals with Rook, switch over to YouTube right now. And if you like your Rook descriptions and bulletins in English and Persian, check us out on Telegram. There, all of those handles are at Roqe Media. And you can become a patron of this show or a sponsor by going to our website, roqemedia.com, and contacting us from there. You missed a lot, Kian. You were away for a little bit. We got a bunch of mail.
Yes, we did. A lot of interesting mail
Is that right?
today. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Like I can't wait to read them. Actually, they're quite funny. Some of them.
We're going to get to the letters of the week. We've also had a lot of response to our Contemporary History of Iran series, part one of the episodes dealing with Reza Shah, which we began last Thursday. All of that you can find at roqemedia.com. We will get to the letters. We'll get to Groovy Shaya. Do you have some music you're going to play after this, by the way? Don't tell me what it is. Did you pick some?
I picked some, and I think actually maybe there's a chance that you will talk about them. Okay. I won't release anything.
Okay. So you think it's something that Babak's going to talk about?
I think so, yes.
All right. We'll get to that as well. All right, Kian, Shaya, stick around. Reza, Khuda Pedar Biyamorse.
What?
Do you say that?
Khuda piyazit kon.
Marhum Reza. No, what do you say? I don't.
Khuda shafat bede.
Zabunet gaz begi. We have often talked about Persian music, its peaks, valleys, and one-dimensional nature on a popular level on this program, but we wanted to start a series to take the opportunity for a deeper dive into an industry and creative class that has struggles in myriad ways. You might call it the plight of Persian music in recent decades. Specifically, what is the state of popular Persian music today, including, say, rock, rap, or alternative pop? How did a burgeoning music business in Iran implode after the revolution? And was it ever all that it was promised to be? And in the years since, why is the Persian music industry outside of Iran so dysfunctional, as we've often discussed? And what are the roots of why Persian rock and alternative music, if not Persian pop itself, has not had a greater global impact in the last half century? Well, our inaugural guest for this series may be a software engineer by profession, but he is a music nerd, a music industry veteran, a rock guitarist, and a producer, and a guy who has consistently made no secret of his passion for building Persian contemporary music. Babak Khiavchi was born in Tehran, spent most of his childhood in the UK and the US, and then returned to Iran with his family after the 1979 revolution. In his teenage years, Babak discovered hard rock and metal music as an emotional outlet and started learning to play the guitar. By the 1990s, he was teaching rock guitar in Tehran and collaborating with multiple music groups in the emerging Iranian underground music scene. In 1999, Babak immigrated to America, and in July 2000, only 10 days before the start of the tour, got a call to join the Gugush band in her comeback tour. Babak did the tour, including that memorable night of the very first Gugush concert after 21 years that took place at Toronto's Air Canada Centre with an audience of over 12,000. Babak thereafter decided to create an independent record label for Iranian underground musicians, Bamohang Productions, and started writing music reviews and creating alternative music programs for Persian media to introduce new artists. He was also instrumental in the success of the Persian indie rock band Kiosk, of which he was a member for a few years. Babak ended the record label in 2010 and began focusing on concert productions and supporting artists with obtaining performance visas and providing career advice. Most recently, Babak has been hosting weekly music-related programs in Persian on Clubhouse. But right now, Babak Khiavchi joins us from Seattle, Washington today. Hello, sir.
Hi, Jian John. I'm really happy to be on your program. I've been a long-time listener of you, and I just wanted to come over and say hi for, interviewing all my guitar idols and some of the musicians that have really had an impact on my life. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for coming on the show, and this is a very particular topic that I think you're really suited for. I hope you don't take it offensively that I called you a music nerd, but rather as a badge of honor.
That was a perfect description.
Okay. Well, I wanted to give you a long and proper introduction, Babak, to set you up for this chat and explain your credentials, because this conversation, as you and I have discussed before we started taping, is going to be less about your personal story and more about what you can tell us and teach me about the contemporary state of Persian rock and alternative music. Good?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
So let me start with the start and go back to the era before the 79 revolution. I mean, we have an idea that music and a music industry was starting to grow in Iran before the 1979 revolution. We don't have the time, of course, to get into a comprehensive history of Iranian popular music through the 20th century, but in the rock and metal and alternative rock realms, what was happening before the revolution?
Before the revolution, there was a lot of experimentation going on, a lot of fusion and different styles blending with Iranian folk music and rock music. We had some great musicians and cover bands like Black Cats, The Rebels, Scorpio, Zanguleha, Ojubaha. Most of these were cover bands. They didn't have original material. The ones that did have original material, like Kurosh Yaghmai, Farhad, Faramaz Aslani, these are the ones that have still remained on our classic Persian rock playlist, and we still listen to them to this day. So these are the ones that have stood the test of time and created some really memorable hits in the Persian music rock scene, I guess.
There's this sense that, I mean, and certainly it's borne out by the experience of Faramaz Aslani, who is part of CBS Records and releases an album, a very innovative, at the time, kind of not a cover record, an original record in 1977, 78. There's this sense that Iran was on the precipice of a really breakthrough when it comes to developing a Persian music industry. Is it fair to say things were thriving, or is that an overstatement, do you think?
I think the art and music scene was really doing well the decade before the revolution. We also had the annual Shiraz Arts Festival, and that took place for over 10 years. And that festival brought a variety of worldwide talent into Iran, which greatly influenced Iranian artists, from jazz musicians, from classical musicians. So when you have this international cultural exchange, you begin to raise the standards of the local music industry. And I think that had a really good effect. And I think the golden years of the Persian pop music scene was the decade before the revolution. Those are when we have all these timeless hits created.
Sure. And the big names that still flourish in Persian music are all from that era, right? They're all from that moment,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Yeah.
By the way, the Shiraz Festival of Arts gets mentioned a lot. We actually did a full episode on the contemporary history of Iran on the Shiraz Festival just a few weeks ago. It's fascinating. It's always so interesting that this revolutionary, innovative festival took place not in Tehran, but in Shiraz, right?
Well, Shiraz has always been known as a hub for art. We have Hafez there. We have all these. I mean, Shirazi people are known as being very emotional and sensitive and art loving, and it's just such a beautiful place. All these wonderful gardens and the architecture, and you can just go on and on about it. So there was this international exchange between Iranian and Western musicians and artists, and at the same time, we were able to showcase Iranian traditional music on the stage and expose it to international artists who were visiting. So that, I think, also helped us both ways.
It seems like a given that the Islamic Revolution, at least after the first year, where things were kind of open in that 1 year window, into the early 1980s, that the revolution basically devastates the Persian rock and alternative music scene. Tell me what you've learned about that time. I mean, is it as simple as that?
Yeah, I mean, after the revolution, the academic music schools like Honaristan Musiqi Milli, they were basically shut down for many, many years. And once they were reopened, they were only focusing on patriotic songs, surudhaye enqelabi. And those were mostly used for state propaganda during the war. And it was only in 1988 where the trade and usage of musical instruments became legal. And it became legal through a fatwa by Ayatollah Khomeini, which included playing chess and eating caviar. So when you put all of these things together, you can imagine what the state of Iran was in 1988. You have all three of these suddenly becoming legal, and people were just overjoyed that, wow, this is a huge change. Things are going to be really better after this. But the music industry didn't change that much. What happened, because of the musical instruments that were easier to access and sell, we had a lot of bands performing cover songs in the underground music scene. And there were all these different hubs developing all over Tehran and all over Iran.
But that's later, right? That's into the 1990s?
That's in, I would say early 90s, yeah.
So just take me back for a second. I mean, and let me just get a little granular here. For those of us who weren't there, either because we didn't live in Iran or who were too young or whatever. Like, say you were one of these musicians who was playing rock music in, 1978. Literally, what happens to your rock guitar and your amp? After 19, like, do you just like hide it somewhere in the basement and never play it? Or, I mean, what happened to what had existed before that time?
To my knowledge, a lot of it went underground. Music instruments, you were really lucky if, the comité would catch you, and then if they didn't break your instrument, because they were really sensitive about anything symbolizing Western culture during the first decade of the revolution. So a lot of these musicians either became silent or they, immigrated to other countries.
Wow. We hear about that underground scene that you were just beginning to talk about developing by the early 1990s. You were part of that, in fact, along with folks like Arash Mitui. So the 1980s are pretty much a write-off for Persian music? I mean, at least in Iran?
Yeah, 1980s was mostly surud-hay enqalabi.
Tell me about the group Khoda.
Khoda. Well, are you referring to Arash Mitui's album Khoda?
Oh, sorry, was that an album? I thought it was the name of the group. you were playing with him. I thought the band was called Khoda. Was the record called Khoda?
Yeah, the album was called Khoda. Yeah, that was one of his first underground rock album official releases. And it's not a big release. You have a small group of people who just take your tape and copy it and distribute it between themselves and give you good feedback. That was the release. But the, I guess, creativity of Arash Mitui in Khoda was that he was blending blues and jazz and rock and traditional Persian dastgah into his music, and using some of poetry from his father and some other Sher-e-No lyrics. And it's just an amazing album. It's just so full of emotion. If you listen to it now, it's really overproduced because we didn't have a lot of good equipment back then. I think it was just a 4-track that he used to develop and record all these tracks. But it's just a great experimentation at that time. This was in 1991.
The word underground music, like, it gets used a lot. It gets used in the West to describe a genre of music, right? Like, it's underground music scene. But in Iran in the 1990s, I mean, it was literally an underground music scene.
Exactly.
And I wonder if you can describe the ecosystem for somebody like me who wasn't there, who was playing music in Canada at the time and would have no sense of this, because I know that, I mean, I can watch the Batman Robadi, the great film from Who Knows About Persian Cats, that's from 2009, and there's sort of an underground music scene at that point that we're watching, but it just means you go behind closed doors and you but it's kind of thriving by that point. In the 1990s, I've got to imagine that there's a real danger of being found out, of being discovered, and yet you're developing in the basements or in the the undergrounds of houses or buildings this scene where young people can hear music and trade tapes, and describe that ecosystem for me.
Yeah, when we talk about basements and underground music, it was literally underground. We would go into our friends' basements and storage spaces and clean out rugs and old cabinets and dead cats and just make it a livable place so we could just spend hours and hours there. Because the main problem was having a soundproof environment that wouldn't bother the neighbors who would call the police or somebody, and then we would have all our equipment confiscated. So it was very carefully scheduled who would, be coming and going, and how we would control the hours of rehearsal so as not to bother any of the neighbors. But it was just like a time machine for us. When you stepped into that environment, you would just forget about all the other issues you had outside in the real world, like school and concours and university and military service and the economy. It was just the way to relax. It was total escapism for us, and something that we started discovering different styles of music and sharing information between ourselves and finding about the magic formulas that would make a chord work on a certain scale and would just give you those constant goosebumps.
What about these little concerts that you would do in the undergrounds? Like, how do you get the word out in a furtive way without the authorities knowing? And how do you gather 200 young people to come for a concert in the underground without the neighbors or the authorities finding out?
Well, I personally never had played in front of a 200 audience. It was usually just 30 or 40 people maximum.
Even 30 or 40. How do they even find out about it?
Just phone calls. We didn't have any mobile phones back then or any social media or internet. It was just word of mouth and just within your trusted circle of friends who would enjoy the kind of music you were trying to perform in that really small and cramped space.
And what happens if you get busted?
You don't want to know. They take you to these komite, they used to call them back then, and you have to fill out all sorts of different forms and describe the offense that you've been accused of and pay fines, and your equipment would get confiscated or broken in front of you. And it's just a really traumatic experience for a musician.
I know this happened quite a bit. I read an interview with you from a few years ago where you were talking about an underground little concert that had happened somewhere in Karaj, and that there was a couple hundred people there, and basically everybody got arrested, everybody got detained, everybody had to serve time for just attending this thing.
Yeah. That happened a lot, yeah.
This is kind of a strange way of coming at this, but let me try it out on you. We often talk about how interesting art can emerge from repressive societies, whether it's the Soviet Union in the 30s or 40s, or whether it's monarchist states that tend to be very repressive. Did the restrictions in Iran, and I suppose do the restrictions in Iran, actually help to foster an underground music scene of any note?
I think it did, and I think it affected the quality of the music that we were listening to and trying to perform. When you have all these different filters that the music has to pass through until it reaches your hand, you only spend your time and energy on the best types of music that you can get. We had travelers from outside of Iran visiting. We would always ask them to bring us CDs of so and so, and we would give them a complete list of the artists that we would want to listen to. So we really didn't spend much time on like cheap pop music back then, at least in my circle of friends. We were focused on good musicians, good guitar players, and trying to emulate that sound and learn from them. And even we had the circle of really enthusiastic jazz listeners, and we would just spend hours and hours listening to jazz albums and debating, analyzing the songs with each other. And that's something that I really miss, because I've never had anything like that in after I've immigrated to the US, until recently, where we have a clubhouse where we can just talk endlessly about music.
But there's an energy that comes from doing something that you know is subversive or taboo, that you couldn't necessarily feel if you're doing it in Toronto or New York.
That's true. That is true. Yes, because that sense of discovering some magical formulas together that you know would probably cause you some problems if the authorities found out. Yes, that is very exciting.
So at the same time as rock music had pretty much died, or I should say, any kind of popular music for the most part had pretty much died in Iran, a Persian music scene is developing in LA, in the States, in Los Angeles in the 1980s and then into the 1990s. But it is dominated by this very generic and homogeneous pop sound, with some notable exceptions and outstanding artists, of course. But overall, this generic sound, how did that happen?
My understanding, my take on this is that, after the revolution, the majority of these A-list Persian singers, they had to leave Iran, and they all somehow landed in Los Angeles. And the majority of them, they were doing really well inside of Iran before the revolution. They were sponsored by government organizations. They had royal commissions. They would perform in festivals. So they really didn't have any other skills or professions other than music to support themselves. So once they came to LA, that was the only thing they could do to make ends meet. And there was a small community of Iranians there. And usually, they would hire them for either weddings or birthdays. And the type of music they would expect is to hear danceable and upbeat music. You don't want to go to an Iranian gathering and sit and talk about philosophy and deeper, So
well, I do, but I guess maybe most people don't, I suppose.
Well, maybe not in the 80s. They didn't want to do that. Right. So yeah, like you said, everything became danceable and 6/8 grooves and less serious songwriting, just some light, entertaining music as an escape from the harsh reality of immigration.
Right. Babak, what can you tell us about something called Caltex?
Yeah, Caltex was an interesting thing. I did some research about it. Caltex Trading actually was established in 1980. It was a food and Persian specialties distribution company. So, they would distribute Persian stuff to Persian groceries, like, all the baqalis and everything. And once we had this whole community of Iranian musicians established in LA, they created Caltex Records and used the food distribution network to distribute Persian pop music to the baqalis. And that became the infrastructure of our Persian music industry.
Wow.
And to this day, it's still like, if you want to get Persian CDs, you don't go to like a bookstore, or even when we had Tower Records and Barnes and Nobles and everything, you would still go to a Persian baqali to get the CDs, or even concert tickets. And when you have this kind of an infrastructure in place, it makes it impossible to track the number of record sales or CD sales. And there's never been a reliable I would say, data aggregator like we have in Billboard magazine that would consistently report the top best-selling artists in Persian music,
Right.
and if we could use it as a reliable reference point. And Caltech's records at some point in the 90s, they represented 75% of all Persian music productions.
Wow. I still don't totally understand why there was, and to a certain extent there still is, this homogeneity in the this LA sound that develops in the 80s and 90s. I mean, if we just take the conversation we've had so far, so there's this increasingly thriving, diverse, interesting music scene that's growing in Iran up until 1979, 1980. A lot of that gets transplanted around the world, and in particular to California. But then it all filters into this one kind of upbeat 6/8 thing. Why is that? I mean, why, if you think about, Guns N' Roses, for example, emerging from the Los Angeles streets and their sound in the mid 80s, why wasn't something like that coming out of the Iranian community?
I think it was, but it wasn't as prominent, and it wasn't, well selling. So the producers would tend to focus on upbeat music. And keep in mind that the Iran-Iraq war was happening, so you had that harsh experience inside of Iran, so people would still prefer to hear upbeat and light, entertaining music. And then you had all these immigrants on the other side of the world, and I think that's my theory, that people were just looking for a way to escape the harsh reality of being Iranian immigrants.
You were here by that point, by the early 2000s. Was there a subversive here, meaning the West? Was there a subversive underground scene that was growing amongst Iranians in the West that was a response to the LA sound?
Not that I know of. If it was, it wasn't getting good exposure. I mean, this is all before the internet and social media happened.
How did the internet help the underground scene in Iran and help the Iranian music scene outside of Iran?
Yeah, so I think access to the internet really was a revolution for Iranian underground music. One of the first albums that came out and represented the Iranian underground rock sound and showed that how creative Iranians can be with the minimum amount of equipment under restrictions, like you mentioned, was an album by the band Oham, and it was called Nahal Hayrat.
Right.
And this was all developed in a home studio, Shahram Sharbaf. He created this, and it was rock music with Hafiz lyrics, and it was just mind-blowing that the quality of production and the musicianship and the beats, it was just an amazing and fresh sound, and there was so much passion in this album. It still gives me goosebumps anytime I listen to it. And then the Shahram also created this website for Oham and started sharing links to different music groups and different files on the internet. And that, I think, that was probably the first hub for Iranian underground music. And this was way before social media, so that was a good start to this trend.
In terms of what you were allowed to play and or record in Iran by the late 1990s and the early 2000s, with the emergence of the internet as well, I mean, I've said this many times on this program, and sure I'll say it forever, but it's so hard for me to understand the the inconsistent, weird, hypocritical, sometimes just confounding decisions around what the state decides in Iran is okay art and what is not okay, right? I can't get my head around it. I'll hear something that I think is entirely benign and be told that this was totally banned, and then I'll hear something that I think, well, I assume that would be banned, and it isn't. So I've mentioned this a couple times on the program, but back to, say, 2003, '93, I interviewed a band called Ariane Band, who were a kind of mixed gender pop rock group from Iran at the time. They were considered kind of like on the cutting edge because there were women in the group. The songs were friendly pop rock songs, but we did the interview in Toronto. There were sort of people from the culture ministry around with folded arms looking at me while I did the interview. But how was music like that, presumably because they were allowed to tour and record, etc., okay in the eyes of the state, but something else wouldn't be?
So there's this thing called Ershad that regulates all the art and music inside of Iran. And in order to get a permission to record or perform a certain piece of music, you would have to get permission for the music itself and also the lyrics and the combination of the lyrics and the music. And the people who would be supervising and had the authority to sign off on these were very rarely artists or musicians.
Right, of course.
They were just that's where all these problems came from. They just had a gut feeling that maybe this would sound too I would say Western, or it wouldn't follow religious laws, and they would not give it permission. And Ariane had, I think, their manager at that point was very well connected with Ershad and the government. And I could be wrong, but I think once you can prove that there is a financial justification of doing such stuff and you can create some income, then a lot of the regulations tend to start easing away.
So I'd be a touring musician in the 1990s, all through the 90s, in North America, and in Europe, and our biggest concern was trying to get along with each other or write songs that we thought were interesting to our fellow bandmates. If you're in Iran as you were, a rock musician, say in 1998, before you come here, is it basically a decision then in terms of the music you're making? Am I going to make music that I think the Ershad will think is okay, and then I'm going to go into that direction, or am I going to do stuff that I know is not going to be okay? Is that what's happening in your mind as you're creating music?
Yeah. Well, here's what I've learned, that Iranian artists are very creative at finding loopholes in regulations. And the way they did this was they would manage to perform rock music without the lyrics, because they could easily get permission for instrumental music. And we would go to see a lot of good music, rock and fusion bands. There was Kaveh performing at that point. There was Avije. There were a lot of bands on stage. Once you eliminate the music, then you can pretty much play anything you like.
Right.
So that's how they got their, they managed to get that stage and live experience, which is really crucial for a performing musician to perform in front of a crowd. You have to.
Oh, I see. Once you get sanctioned, once you're okay for one piece of music or something, you have more latitude. They check you less for the future recordings. Or?
Yeah. Then you develop this resume, and you say, okay, well, we performed music, we generated income. Here's your share, and we can do this again. They don't care if the music is heavy metal or thrash metal or whatever. They're mostly concerned about the lyrics.
But I still don't get, I remember when we had Babak Kiovchi on the show last year, and we were talking about those first two records that he made while he was still in Iran, and one of them gets banned, or he's not allowed to play the songs, and then you listen to the record, it's like a fucking guitar, soft jazz rock guitar record. I mean, it's the most, I don't even know how anybody would find that problematic or devilish or something. This is why I can't understand how these rules are applied.
We couldn't figure it out either. I mean, it was pretty much a gamble. you would just place your bet, and maybe it would you would get permission, maybe you wouldn't. There's no set logical rules that you could follow and figure out if this is going to get permission or not. There were hundreds of concerts that got canceled the night before they were scheduled to go live. And there's just no way of predicting who is going to stop you from going on stage.
You know, I said that I didn't want to focus too much on your personal story, but the fact that you were on stage at that historic Gugush show playing guitar, her first time playing in 21 years, that had to be a visceral experience, not just for you, not just for her, not just even for the people who attended, but for Persian music. It represented something. Can you talk about that night?
Yeah, that was probably one of the most memorable nights of my life. This was in 2000, July 2000, and this was 10 days before the show, and I got this call from my good friend Babak Kiovchi, who's a fantastic bass player in Iran, and Babak Amini, and they called me and said, we're in Toronto, we're going to play with Gugush on her comeback tour, come and join us. And just, out of the blue, I was going to college, I was working, so I dropped everything, and I said, okay, well, this is a once in a lifetime experience, I need to be there. And July 29, 2000, there was about 12,000 people there, and at Toronto's Air Canada Center. And it was just an amazing night, because a few days before that, Ahmad Shamloo had passed away. And when Gugush came on stage, the first thing that she said was that let's have a moment of silence for the passing of the father of Iranian intellectuals, Ahmad Shamloo. And at that point, where you're standing on stage with Gugush and there's 12,000 people in the room and everybody goes dead silent for a minute. And it was just an amazing experience for me, that at that point you don't feel that anybody has like a political or a religious affiliation. You just feel an Iranian community coming together through music and healing as a group therapy experience with the music that has survived so many generations, and it's all because of an amazing artist like Gugush.
It's quite a moment that you got to be there for and perform as part of. It feels like certainly a watershed in terms of the rebirth of Persian music, this time outside of Iran. And through the 2000s, the early 2000s and that first decade of the 2000s, there does seem to be a lot of interesting music being developed both in Iran and outside, including some bands you played. And tell me what you wanted to do with Bamahang Productions.
With Bamahang, so when I toured with the Gugush band, we played 14 concerts in Canada and the US, and then I decided I need to go back to college and finish my studies, because I've had that experience. I mean, they continued and had a worldwide tour after that, but
you left the Gugush tour?
I left the Gugush tour after 14
How dare you?
I know. Well, I learned a lot during those few months that I was on tour with them, and I learned that the Persian music industry is not a safe place. There's no guarantee that you're going to get a paycheck at the end of the month, or you're going to get what you deserve. So I went back to something safer, like computers, where I could get a regular paycheck at the end of the month. But I used my knowledge and my passion to develop this independent label called Bamahang Productions. And at that point, CD Baby had just started, and this was one of the very first websites that you could submit your music to, and also print on-demand CDs, and also create digital forms of this and distribute it on digital platforms. And at that point, iTunes didn't even exist. Spotify didn't exist at all. It was just one or two, like I think it was Amazon Music that was just starting to create the digital music market. But this gave independent artists a complete autonomy and independence from big record label contracts. So you could create and develop and distribute your work the way that you wanted to on your terms. And so I used this channel to get underground music from Iran that did not have Ershad permission for recording and publishing. And then I started distributing this through CD Baby online on the internet. And that was just a very, very rewarding experience for me. And I think a lot of these Iranian artists got exposure through this channel.
Why didn't you continue that? Was it because it's just too hard to make a go of it, or did you not want to?
It's a full-time job. And I was pretty much by myself at that point. It was just me spending hours and hours and days just doing this. And I had a life and a marriage and career, and I needed to balance all of these together. And it was just taking too much time out of this. And there was no profit margin on it to make it financially feasible.
Wow.
It was just a passion of mine that I was following. But when it started taking too much time off of my day job, then I realized, okay, well, maybe I started something and other people can continue it. And I'm happy to see that a lot of similar models are now being continued and thriving, and I'm very happy to see that.
Well, yes and no. Let me segue into today and the nature of the Persian music industry and market today, in as much as we can do this with any authority in just a few minutes. But to get your thoughts on this, I mean, one wants to think that things have gotten a lot better and that we're at a new moment. And there's certainly more diversity to Iranian music these days, from, hip hop to alternative rock to folk. Some of the groups and artists, as we started off when we were talking to folks we've had on this program in the last year. But really, the market feels fragmented. It's clearly dysfunctional still. Much of the music feels, I dare say, uninspired or derivative. What accounts for this in your view?
Well, like you said, there is a fragmented music industry. There's no coherent infrastructure for reporting or creating music. There's a music industry inside of Iran, then there's the one outside of Iran, and nobody knows how to track the best-selling music, and there's no I would say democratization of data. Everybody's just creating their own playlists, and that I think is one of the most important issues that we have. So even if good music is being created, there's no way to track it and get it, give exposure to it.
How would tracking it help?
Well, I guess. So if we're looking at Spotify as one of the major platforms
Sure.
that people are using, you can go to spotifycharts.com and look up regional reports for the top streaming charts by any country except Iran, because Iran is not even on that drop-down list of options.
Right.
So Spotify doesn't even recognize Iran as a market, it just doesn't exist in terms of Spotify. And one of the reasons I would say, is that a lot of users in Iran connect to the internet and to Spotify through VPN connections,
Yes.
which masks their IP address inside of Iran. So Spotify doesn't recognize this user is logging in through Iran. But once you have a sort of you know that there's a market out there, then you try to describe it and go more granular and figure out why there's this amount of listeners from that specific market. Iranian music is just categorized as world music. There is nothing else that describes it when you want to
Right.
submit.
There's no recognizable genre for Persian music.
Yes,
Even one called Persian music. There isn't, right?
there is nothing like that. There's either, even if you look at all the Grammy nominations that we've had from Iranian artists, they have either been world music or new age. There's nothing for Persian music. Once, I think one of the important steps in getting recognition and representation and being able to discover good Persian music is trying to establish an identity for Persian music. And we don't have that in place anywhere at all.
Yeah, I did a little experiment myself. I went on Spotify, I went on iTunes, and I looked up, I tried to, use the search mechanism there to see what I could find in terms of aggregating Iranian musicians or Persian artists or Persian music. The best I could get is there are lists of the top Persian hits, quote unquote, that you can find, say, on Spotify, but they're all distinctly in a certain kind of pop sound. They're all of one genre, really. There's nothing that aggregates any other kind of sound. I mean, any other kind of Persian artist that except for those that I guess are getting a lot of spins on Persian pop radio somewhere. Would that be where those artists are found?
Pop radio, I guess you mean internet sites?
Yeah,
internet radio.
into Persian pop radio streaming and things like that.
Yeah, probably. But even those sites, they don't categorize them as Persian music. They just call them like rap or hip hop, and there's no distinctive Persian label. And we actually had a chat on Clubhouse about the Turkish rock scene, and we were discussing why Turkish rock sounds so good and has that Turkish identity in it, and it's just getting better and better all the time. And it goes way back into the 60s where they started this experimentation with folk music and Turkish rock and everything. But that's a really good model that we could follow for Persian music. I mean, Turkish pop music and rock music is just phenomenal, in my opinion. It just sounds so fresh and up to date, and it still maintains their own Turkish identity, and they have their own categories for them. They have Turkish rock. Turkish rock is well known. There's Anatolian rock, there's arabesque, there's all these other ways that you can describe Turkish music to others. We do not have that established yet.
But they also have the advantage of having a country, the source country, united with the diaspora, right? I mean that again. I mean the dysfunction exists when someone like Erfan or Hamed Nikpay or anybody who's doing stuff that is outside of that particular pop sound, or even some of those pop artists, of course, can't even go and tour or play or earn royalties from the main country where they have fans.
That's true. Yes, that is true. We can't have financial transactions from Iran over the internet. There's all sorts of international restrictions. Yeah, so the dysfunctionality stems from a lot of different issues that other countries do not have.
And something we've talked about a fair bit on this program as well: copyright, publishing, royalties. I mean, when these things are, when platforms out there don't feel like they need to pay for the music, and in fact, some big platforms ask the artists to pay for them to play the music, that is not going to be able to foster the conditions where artists can be making a living at this and become an aspiration for younger folks who want to get into it, right?
Exactly. And this is one of the issues I had with, we talked about Caltex a while ago. What they did was that they would give the artist a lump sum of money and just purchase the entire rights to the music without any copyright contracts or royalties, and Caltex would own the entire music publishing rights and the rights to the music videos. So that's like several sources of income that an artist is denied of because they just got a lump sum of money up front. And Caltex owned these copyrights for I don't know how many years, and probably they still do own a lot of them. And Iranian artists, a lot of them don't know their rights. They don't know they can join artists unions. They don't know they can register their songs, join ASCAP. We need, I think, more entertainment lawyers who would sit down and educate Iranian artists.
But do you know something that I've learned just recently, and it blew me away as somebody who's been a manager and for artists in the past. There are well-known Iranian artists, like the people and bands and artists that we would consider the top tier that, you know, most Iranians around the world would recognize, that have no manager, that have no agent. That, in other words, there's no structure of management and label representation for a lot of artists in Persian music today. I don't even know how that happens. You know, you couldn't imagine that in the West. You know, it would be very avant-garde for a popular artist to not have a team around them, and yet that doesn't exist in Persian music.
Yep, that's another point of dysfunctionality in this industry, that there's no trust, there's no reliable label representation and artist management. The majority of successful Iranian artists that I know of, they are managed by either their siblings or their spouses. And that seems to be a winning model because of the trust that they can establish.
Is that what it's about? Trust?
I think so.
It's, I mean, it's just bad business, right? It's weird. It's honestly weird. It's that there isn't, that there isn't more of a priority put on an infrastructure being developed. I mean, this is why artists are kind of flailing and at the whims of, somebody's wedding invite or some gig that they hope to get at a festival or something, because, good artists in the West have representation. I mean, that's just kind of the way it works.
Yeah. Well, a good artist manager would create multiple streams of income for the artist.
Right.
But when you have a really bad infrastructure like we have in the Persian music industry, you cannot really do any long-term planning. So you're just looking for, how to book the next gig or the next concert, get that lump sum of money upfront before, somebody goes bankrupt and they can't pay you. So it's just short-term and short-term profit as soon as possible. Yeah. And go on to the next album.
It's a bit heartbreaking, really, because even sort of indie, folk or rock or artists in North America who have any traction at all will already have an agent, will have management, will have a label that if nothing else is taking care of the business end entirely, so that the artist can focus on being an artist as well, right? Instead of trying to negotiate with somebody who's going to be their promoter at some dodgy hall in Richmond Hill, and the artist is doing the negotiation themselves and going, well, can I get it paid a little bit more? I mean, it's so difficult for me to get my head around how this all happened, although I'm understanding it through these kind of conversations that we're having.
Yeah, it is, like you said, it's really heartbreaking that artists have to spend so much time dealing with the business side of stuff, while they should be focusing on their songwriting and their self-expression instead of negotiating with numbers and sometimes not getting paid at all.
Yeah, or even interacting with the fans, building the following, doing all of that stuff rather than negotiating. How significant is Radio Javan and the fact that it is, if not the only game in town, the big game in town? I mean, how big a deal is that in terms of shaping what becomes successful and not in Persian music today?
Radio Javan, I know some of the founders and I've worked with them. They are really good at what they do. They are very highly technical. I think they were the first Iranian radio that created a mobile app, and they started streaming their libraries on mobile applications with really good quality. And now they've emerged as like an entire production company where they put on concerts and do artist promotion and stuff. They're really the quality is really good what they're doing, but I would like to see some more competition in the market and give artists more choices to choose from, because right now I think they have a monopoly on the Persian music market, and you need to have a more level playing ground. And you know, yeah, I think I'm trying to choose my words very carefully.
Why are you trying to choose your words carefully?
Well, because they because they are my friends, and I like the quality of their work.
Okay,
But
well,
I also like.
I mean, this is another thing about being in the Persian community. We're not allowed to be critical of anything. We're not allowed to. I mean, criticism can be constructive, right? We can love and appreciate Radio Javan and also come up with some ideas that, you know, oh, here's something that could help. I don't know. I mean, it feels everybody's always walking on eggshells with this stuff because our community gets very sensitive but how do we make this better?
Yeah. My focus has been on trying to get data accessible to artists. I mean, we live in the information age, or whatever we want to call it, and we are dealing with huge sets of data every day, but it seems that this data is not accessible to artists. They do not know where their music is being streamed to and who's buying their music, and you know, how it's being utilized. I would like to see
which
that
means
happen.
They're not getting paid.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So once you have the democratization of data, then you have the evidence to back up your claims and say, well, okay, if I'm the best-selling artist with this many millions of streams, where's my paycheck?
Babak, where are you, before I let you go? This has been really interesting, so interesting to me. Where are you at in terms of your feelings about where Persian music is today? I mean, as the guy who was playing hard rock and teaching rock guitar in Tehran and underground in the 1990s, to the guy who helped build a kiosk and was playing on those tours and developing the production company you developed with Bamohang, and to the guy who has been trying to promote and help create the conditions where Persian artists can travel and get visas. Are you optimistic for the future of Iranian rock and alternative music?
I'm actually very optimistic because I've been discovering Persian artists, like 10 new artists every week, good artists. And these are all independent artists. They're young talent. They're emerging. They have great ideas. And I think the future is really bright. And we just have to spend more time discovering the artists and supporting them in any way we can. And supporting doesn't mean necessarily just financially. I mean, just talking about them, educating each other about the existence of these different genres of music inside and outside of Iran. I think that would be the best way to give them more exposure. And I'm very optimistic that we'll have a good and thriving scene, at least in my lifetime.
Just out of curiosity, where do you go to find the 10 artists a week that you get so inspired by?
Everywhere. They're on Spotify, they're on SoundCloud, they are on Instagram, and I just have a couple of different circle of friends that we share music with each other, and it's just a great discovery process.
I've really enjoyed this. I can't wait to do it in person again at some point. I appreciate you joining us from Seattle. I appreciate your expertise, your wisdom, and thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you, Jian John. And I just wanted to say thank you for interviewing Leonard Cohen. And I love that interview. I've watched it several times.
Thank you so much for saying that, too. Talk soon. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Bye.
There he is, music nerd, music industry veteran, rock guitarist, and producer Babak Khiavchi. Follow him on Clubhouse to hear more of his commentary. It's always excellent. Next week on this series, we're going to hear a perspective from inside Iran in recent years with music critic and writer Amir Bahari. Stay tuned for that. Babak Khiavchi joined us from Seattle, Washington today.
بیساز که یارم به سلامت بازایت و برهاندم از بند ملامت خاکه ره آن یار سفر کرده بیارید تا چشم جهان بین کنمش جای اقامت که از شهتم راه ببستند آن خال و خط و زلف و رخ و عارض قامت که در دست تو هم مرحمتی کن فردا که شبم خاک جسود عشق و ندامت درویش مکن ناله ز شمشیر حفاظ این طایفه از کشته ستانم کشته ستانم آنکه به تخلیل و بیاندم زنی
Yes. A little taste of the song Darvish. That's Oham, right?
Yes.
The Van Oham. I had a sense you were going to play that. I know you really like that.
How?
Because you played it for me once before.
Yes.
You love that.
I've never heard that.
Isn't that cool?
I love it.
You know what's cool about that? So what's that from like 20 years ago?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. 1999.
1999.
Yeah.
So that, and they're in Iran, right? Or they were in Tehran when they
in Tehran, yeah.
So it amazes me. I mean, this is speaking of dysfunction and still great art being made. They create that music that can't get played on the radio in Iran. They can't perform it live. But it's awesome. I mean, it's up there with any other kind of power rock pop of the early 2000s. It's got that sound.
How would I find music like this? Like, there's no way for me to come across this unless someone like Shia walks into my life and says,
I mean, that's
a tall drink of water.
Shia
walks into your life.
So I mean, that's the thing, you know. We don't have a like Persian category on Spotify that you can go like Persian rock, and that's I
thought that was a really important point that Babak was making.
Yes,
that there is, you know, you can't even the tools that do exist like Spotify. It's unclear. You know, you just sort of go to a world music or something like that to find in terms of the genre. Like there are a few, as I mentioned, Persian music lists of, you know, the Persian hits of today or something like that. But there's no genre related, and so I mean, it makes it all perpetuates, right? It's harder to discover stuff. What did you think of that, Babak Khiavchi?
It was eye-opening. I mean, listen, this isn't my world. I'm not into music like you guys. You guys are inside the industry, or you used to be at least. So it was very interesting for me in that sense that it's just, I never like thought of things the way that he was talking about it, and I had no idea that there was no Persian genre on Spotify. That makes me sad. And by the way, I was at that Gugush concert.
You were?
My mother, my parents.
In the year 2000?
Yeah, we were in Toronto at that time, you know, just over the holidays, was it? Or was it summertime? Anyway, they dragged me to that concert.
They dragged you. It was very emotional, right? Was it very emotional?
Yeah, it was. Well, to be honest, I was like 11 years old at the time, so I was trying to be a white kid. I didn't care for the Persian culture. So
did your parents cry cry?
Oh yeah, I think that actually made me realize, wow, this is really special. It's
And the
Gugush.
Shamlu thing.
Oh,
and
Yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy.
11 years old, you wouldn't have.
Yeah, I
mean,
don't give a shit at that point, but I appreciate it now.
Do you feel like Babak was? I mean, he's a great ambassador in a way, talking about this stuff because he's diplomatic. But do you feel like he was pulling punches a little bit, like he was not saying everything he could say? I mean, certainly when we were talking about
Radio Java.
Radio Javon, some of the stuff.
It's hard to tell because Babak, even if he wants to like even if he wants to like fight,
Swear
with
at you, yeah.
he tries to do in a way that you.
Diplomatic.
But I mean, I think he delivered.
He made his point.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And what other thing that I want to say about the song that we played, Darvish, and it's related to the one of topics that we discussed. I mean, you discussed with the Babak about that you don't know the rules of Ershad, that who can get license, who cannot. Like the Oham, their whole album was the poems by Hafiz. The Hafiz. Everybody knows Hafiz, but there is no chance that they could get a license because it was a rock music.
That's interesting though, because one of the things that Babak said that was illuminating for me was that he said it usually really is about the lyrics. He said if you can get the lyrics through, then you can kind of play whatever music you want, which I thought was very curious.
Yes, but yes, I said that because even that you don't know. Like it happened to me that I brought several lyrics to Ershad. I remember the one that actually it was for Hafiz. They draw a red line on it that you cannot sing this, and you never know that.
But as somebody who's been a songwriter, throughout my life, and I think about those times when I sat down and wrote songs at 3 a.m, the ones that did well for me or whatever. To have to calculate into that, when I asked them the question about, do you have to think about when you're creating?
Yes.
I mean, the last thing you want to do for any artist is say, by the way, when you're painting that picture, think about a government regulation, right? Or whatever it is. So in the moment of creating, or do you need to think about Ershad? And I expected him to kind of say, well, that's not what you do. Later on, you think about, and he's like, no. I mean, that's like, while we're writing, we're thinking about that. And is this going to make it through the censor? And is it not? And that's no way to develop a creative industry. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, instead of like practicing our instrument, we had to find a loophole to how to ditch Ershad to get a license. And
when you guys Dang Show you're not banned or something, but you weren't able to play, was that because the Ershad said that you're crossing the line or something? Or?
Yes, I mean, let me say something right now. Because of Babak, Dang Show is Dang Show. I have to mention this, know.
What do you mean?
So he released our first album. He was kind of our first promoter, and he kind of discovered us. Yeah. And
no wonder you said all those nice things about him.
So actually, one of the reasons that we were banned of performing in Iran was that like Babak released our first album because he was in the United States, and so.
Wait a minute, he discovered you, but then he created the issue where you couldn't get it.
He discovered us, and we didn't know if we released our first album outside of Iran, then we cannot perform inside Iran. So
you mean just releasing the record outside of Iran was an issue?
One of the biggest issues, yeah.
I mean, I will continue to ask that question of anybody that comes on the show. I mean, how do you make sense of these rules and regulations? Unfortunately, the answer seems to be you don't. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but it's maddening. Kian, it's amazing that you can even pay attention with all the sun you've had, the joy,
Indeed.
Whenever the life gets difficult, I look over at Keon and realize how things could be different.
I almost feel guilty for it sometimes.
You just came back from Antigua. By the way, you've got a cough or something. I feel like not only have you had your vacation, now you've got COVID and you're giving it to me.
I do not. I had a PCR test as soon as I arrived at
But
the airport.
since then you got it. I can feel the molecules.
I've been home all weekend. There's no way. I just feel a little bit of, that like, when you're
overexerted.
Listen, whatever happened to having a regular little bit of a
not
cold?
Allowed.
You
Colds
know, it's
are not allowed anymore.
right?
No. It's Omicron. That's what that is.
Yeah, that's all there is out there. But no, I'm fine. I promise you.
Man, you got out. You got out the right time.
Oh my!
They might be banning the flights again now.
I can't believe this. I cannot believe that we're back.
Yeah.
Just please, if they take away the gym from me, I think that'll be.
I don't think that's going to go into lockdown.
They closed it down in Montreal, in
Closed
Quebec. All the gyms and salons.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, anyway. Sorry to ruin everybody's mood.
No. Our very own Captain Reza. We didn't want to talk about it too much last week because we were all actually afraid that we actually had the COVID. But now we realized we didn't get it from him. Of course, now we might get it from you.
No way.
But but there was a little scare because Captain Reza the week before, he'd been running around in your hair like, nobody's business. And then all of a sudden he's like, hey, I can't speak. And my throat. Yeah.
He lost his voice?
Well, this is weird, Captain Reza. The COVID seems to manifest itself differently in different people. So his girlfriend had all of the traditional symptoms, right? Which is like high temperature, cough, shortness of breath, unable to taste anything, no sense of taste. Captain Reza, he started making good movies, which is weird. After all the years of making shit, Captain Reza was vomiting. He was throwing up like constantly, and it's to him it's almost like he's got like stomach flu or something, right? Shit. Yeah. So and on the weekend he was telling me, I don't understand, my throat I can't talk, and I said, well, that's actually from vomiting. If you vomit so many times, it's traumatic for the throat. So, I
just remembered. So I went scuba diving in Antigua, and let me tell you,
have COVID.
Anyone who scuba dives, Antigua is not the place to do it. The waves are fucking crazy over there.
Was Antigua amazing?
It was amazing, but the scuba diving, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, and I'm the faint of heart.
Because the
point of that, it was the goddamn waves. So I got seasick constantly, and I would throw up, and then I would go down again. And, all right, you ready to do this? I'm like, okay.
I mean that quickly? Like you'd go scuba diving, you come out and you throw up, and then you go back in?
So I paid for an advance.
It's a good way to lose weight. Maybe I should start scuba diving.
The thing is, I paid for the advanced scuba diving, and I was like, I'll be damned if I don't finish this damn course. So I had to. Yeah. So that made me think maybe that's why my throat's a little off. So I don't have COVID, okay? That's the point of this.
So
it makes it worse. No, because of that.
Every time I have like a last night or something, I felt like a tickle in my throat, and then I was rethinking all the people I went into this Starbucks, I did this, I walked by Shaya, like, who gave this to me? And I don't actually think we should close down everything. I'm not one of those, but in fact, I'm expecting to travel to Dubai and Istanbul in like a couple weeks, so I'm hoping that
just go.
Close things
don't
down.
listen to
just
what
go
they
and
say.
don't
just
come back.
Go. Yeah, exactly.
Go where everything's just open. People have COVID and they're all right. So next week we'll continue this the Plight of Persian Music Part 2, and then in the future we're going to do more parts of this as well. In the meantime, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Right.
Are you ready?
It's Monday. We hadn't done this for a couple of weeks because Keon was in the sun. It's the letters of the week.
Who wants to say
Yeah.
No one can do it like Reza.
No.
We need the captain.
Dear Reza.
Last week, episode 159, we had renowned Iranian-American psychic, hypnotherapist, and holistic healer, Fia Johansson on the show, otherwise known as the Persian medium.
Oh, I know. I knew when you were saying we got a lot of letters.
Oh, yeah.
It's about Fia because some people loved her.
Some people loved her. Some people hated her.
Didn't like
Absolutely hated her.
I mean, I guess I don't know if we'd say even just her or any psychic
medium,
or something.
that's right.
Some people would like. People don't believe in it, or
exactly. I mean, it depends on what you believe. Like,
right.
Anyway, Sadaf Dargahi wrote, "I like this episode. Besides her superpower, she sounds like a very smart and busy woman. Hope she can pass some of her energy here, so I can do 1/4 of what she usually does in her life with 3 kids and so much more."
Yeah, there's no question she's industrious. It's amazing the amount of things she does. It's like good for her.
Yeah. Then we have Mo Safa Bakhsh, who takes a different stance. "I did not know you interview crazy people as well."
Right.
And then
Clearly hasn't heard the interviews with Reza. With Sabi Roham.
Naz Khan wrote, "Was so waiting for you to ask her the $1 million question. When will the pandemic end? Lol."
That's right. Using
Why
her
didn't
superpowers. Yeah.
Nunush wrote saying, "Thank you, Jian. This was one of the best episodes ever."
All right. Fia Johansson fan.
All right. Bob the PM wrote, "I always got something at the end of every Roqe interview. This one didn't give me anything. Adding no value. I don't believe even one word out of her thousands of words. With all respect to you, Jian."
All right. I thank you for the respect. Listen, you're welcome to not love all of the guests that come on the show. There's a variety of guests. Some of them are not going to be everybody's cup of tea, as Shirin Nasiri would say.
That is true. And then we have Amir Reza Shams, who wrote a nice, a hefty letter. "Dear Roqe Team, hope you're all doing okay. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas to all of you. I just listened to the episode with Fia Johansson, and I must say, this was the funniest episode of Roqe that I've heard." And in brackets he has, "coming from a show that has had actual comedians. It says a lot. And I've listened to all the episodes of this great podcast. I've recommended this show to all my friends, but this episode, as much as I tried not to be biased, was a punch to my face.
Oh.
People like Miss Johansson are the type of individuals who make social media and the world as a whole unbearable, spreading false information and conspiracy theories left and right. I don't usually send letters to your podcast as I don't see any value that I can bring to your show, but I cannot sit idly by and see my favorite show becoming a place for people with fake followers and cheap mindsets. Love you all, and I'm looking forward to more episodes with added value on the Iranian diaspora. Not interviews with charlatans that shatter the image of our already battered heritage and culture for their own business."
Oof.
Oof.
All right. Not a fan.
He's a fan of the show,
Fia
but
Johansson.
not a fan of the Fia.
But, I'll say this again. I mean, we had the Persian medium, Fia Johansson, on Monday. On Thursday, we had Dr. Shal Bakhosh on Reza Shah. On the weekend, we had Firs Naderi. The week before, we had Marangisa Kaur. So, I mean, it is a variety, and I would hope that our listeners would appreciate that. And just 2 letters ago, this person that was one of my favorite best episodes ever, right? So it's very interesting to hear
There's
this
something for
feedback.
everybody. It's a balanced show. You're not going to love it all, obviously. But Fred Parvana sure does. He says, "Dr. Johansson is one of the most generous, gracious, and nicest people I have come to know. I'm so happy you interviewed her."
All right. Thank you, Fred.
Bahar, last name HGH, says, "Mullahs, Ayatollahs, and the Basijis will be pleased to see this episode. People like this lady definitely endorse the superstition they have been feeding our community for years that ensured their survival."
All right.
Oof.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to another episode. Episode 159, we had an interview. 158, my apologies. We had an interview with Iranian-Canadian teenage genius Erfan Nurai, who's an award-winning quantum physics inventor. Yes, that's quite the opposite of the Persian medium. So, balance. We have Nazila Rafizadeh, who wrote, "Thanks, Jian and Roqe Team, for this great interview. Just remember his name. He will be a famous person in the future. It's the truth that his parents have a major and important role in his success.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's true.
Yeah. Samira Talibi wrote, I'm proud of Irfan. On the other hand, I'm sad that my country is losing these talents.
Yes.
It's true. Parpar Adab wrote, Irfan is a national treasure. That he is. And then
of which nation, though?
That's a good
National
question.
treasure of Canada or of Iran?
Oh, humanity.
Humanity. That's beautiful, Shaya. My God. Anahita Irani wrote quite the letter. She wrote, thank you and very well done as always, Roqe Team. I've been listening to your amazing show for quite some time now, and I have to admit that your show literally saved me from getting depressed during the pandemic.
Oh, I love that. That's nice.
I've been meaning to write a thank you letter for a long time now, but as I'm a mother of 2 little ones and English being my second language, I couldn't manage to do so. Since I didn't want to just write any thank you letter, I wanted to write a thank you letter that does justice for your amazing show and the great content you provide, and do so with minimal writing errors. Also, to answer the question that Jian had about why Iran's government doesn't appreciate geniuses like Irfan. Since the dictatorship of the mullahs started, Khomeini himself said that the problems rise from the universities and well-educated people. This regime is all for crushing people's hopes and dreams, and it's not in their agenda to support and flourish young people like Irfan, as this would be a great threat to their dictatorship. Yeah.
Thank you for that letter, Anahita, for writing in. Much appreciated. By the way, I got some negative feedback about Irfan.
Oh,
The
no way.
Boy genius.
Irfan?
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
could say something
This musician guy I know, who will remain unnamed, but he's not a Faramaz Aslani fan either.
Okay.
The guy wrote and was like, "Oh, that guy's a fake." I'm like, he's a kid.
He's a child.
19 years old. Yeah. Who cares? He invented some things. I mean, it's like
Are you serious?
I'm
Oh, wow.
100% serious. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Not everybody's cup of tea.
No.
We have a general letter from Ehsan Hudkani. He wrote, Hi, dear Roqe Team. This picture is from the time, by the way, he sent a picture of with a sign saying listening to Roqe from, I'll go on. This picture is from the time I was listening to Roqe from Mashhad, Iran. And now I'm listening from Ottawa, Canada.
Oh,
He moved.
welcome to Canada.
Yes.
A big shout out to the fantastic Roqe Team, dear Jian, Shayajan, Aghay Reza, Kianjun, Super Parisa, and all of you guys.
Oh, hi, Reza. Jeez.
Giving him a title.
Wrong title. He's a captain, not an Allah.
How could you?
That's great. Welcome, Ehsan. Welcome to Canada. That's nice to have you here.
Well, then after all of that, it's time for the letter of the week.
All right.
So this username simply goes by number one. Like there's no name, but whoever it is, we thank you for your letter. Says, bravo. The full, oh, by the way, this is the episode of Irfan. Yeah. He says, bravo.
Irfan
Nurai.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. That's right.
Not Irfan the rapper
That's
or
right,
Irfan the basketball player.
Not to be confused.
Although we love them as well.
He says, number one says, bravo, the full package, all the works. He's got it all. This guy is really amazing. And I mean that not just in terms of his academic ingenuity, but also when it comes to his overall intellect. He has a deep understanding of the whole entire education process and is the living proof that unilateral policies and imposing limits on real talented people out there using a standardized testing system poisons that pool of talent. He really gets it. Do the test results really tell you what field you deserve to be in? Does doing poorly mean you are not going to be a good doctor, for instance? Yet some of these poor performers move abroad and breeze through the education system and become darn good professionals. Which, come to think of it, could be one reason why brainiacs like this young man at this stage in his academic life and others on much more advanced levels prefer to get the heck out of the country in order to seek and actually receive support from their ideas. One more thing. I feel everything that Kian feels on the inside and Captain Reza on the outside, in brackets he has lol, pretty much after each show.
Oh.
But it's all good, and even though I go through many boxes of tissues and bags of sunflower seeds to calm me down, I'm going to continue listening, learning invaluable lessons here.
Oh,
Wasn't that
great.
lovely? That was a great
Why do you
letter.
think that's a male?
Why do I think that's a male?
Yeah.
A male?
Yeah, he said.
That's a good question. I don't know. I just read it as a guy for some reason. I don't know.
I understand. I feel everything that Keon feels on the inside.
Oh, it could be. I don't know.
Captain Rez on the outside, though.
So I guess maybe.
Why doesn't this person feel anything that you and I are, Shaya, on the inside or outside? It's confusing.
That part confused me a little. So how could you feel what Captain Reza feels on the outside?
And what you feel on the inside?
I don't know.
And what is Captain Reza feeling on the outside?
Like, I'm assuming my soul and Captain Reza.
Well, I get that part. You're inside.
Yeah,
but I mean, Captain Reza feels on the outside. With the wind on his face?
I don't know.
The chafing of his beard? Had to turn a lovely letter into a source of ridicule. Sorry, number one, or however you're... First of all, by all means, at some point you can tell us your name. There's nothing wrong with that. If you wish, we'd love to hear who you are and where you're writing from. But should you wish to remain anonymous or with your username, thank you for your letter of the week. It's very much appreciated. But maybe you could send a supplemental letter explaining what it is you feel on the inside that Keon feels and Captain Reza feels on the outside, pretty much after every show.
Needs box of tissues and sunflower seeds to get through it. So.
I feel what Savi Roham feels in his hands and Super Parisa in her ears. I feel what Shaya feels in his groin area and what Jian feels in the nape of his neck. I feel producer Susan's brain and Ponta the artist's feet.
Please explain yourself, number one.
Number one, first of all.
That's his name. That's all we know.
It's amazing that he got the number one.
Yeah.
I think other people would
it's on
or
YouTube.
She.
He or she.
They. Maybe it's they.
Maybe. Who knows these days?
All right. Thank you very much to Fabulous Keon. Thank you, Groovy Shaya. Thank you to everybody out there. We'll continue our series, The Plight of Persian Music, next week. This Thursday, we continue the contemporary history of Iran, the second part on Reza Shah with Dr. Shail Bakhash. This time, the fall of Reza Shah, coming this Thursday. And later this week, it's Christmas.
Oh, yeah. It's coming up.
This
Santa Claus
Christmas.
is coming.
Yeah.
That's a good one, too.
That's full time for Roqe for today. Thank you very much, everybody. Listen, if you want to check out more episodes of Roqe, our Roqe videos, funny moments, outtakes, the list of guests, the lists of topics, roqemedia.com is the place to go. roqemedia.com. That's where you can also go to become a patron or sponsor of our program. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together: Savi Roham, talented Anahita, producer Susan Ponta, the artist, the fabulous Keon, Super Parisa, Aghay Mehdad, Captain Reza, and Groovy Shaya. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. Please subscribe on any or all of our platforms if you've not done so already. Find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. Happy Christmas to you all. And Mizun Bashi.